One thing I did want to add in at the end as well is just a hit list of different things that seem to be the biggest needle movers from an acne mitigation aspect, at least worthwhile to delve into, like regardless if you are, the hyper extreme outlier who basically either has to not touch this shit at all or use Accutane at like a full blown, blast dosage of Accutane. There are things you can be doing to reduce your risk and attenuate the acne severity. It's just like, and these will be more applicable to most people who are acne prone as opposed to people who are like hyper extreme outlier, volcano burst territory, acne devastation cases. So I felt it was worthwhile touching on this hit list as well. These are just like the main things I could think of off the top of my head that I thought was worth making a list on. So, and this is for naturals too as well. Some of this stuff, just keep in mind, it's pretty obvious which one's which. But anyways, hormone selection, 19 NORs in particular, trenbolone, nandrolone on top of high dose testosterone or just a moderate dose, depending on the individual, are especially problematic seemingly for acne. What a lot of people don't realize is the layering of the progestogenic activity on top of the already present, androgenic and estrogenic burden of your test base, however much it is like a 1 + 1 = 3 equation in some individuals. Like some of the worst breakouts I've seen are test plus nandrolone, test plus tren. But in general, interestingly enough, back in the golden era when guys were not using test as a base at a high dosage, seemingly less acne prevalent when they were using like, DEC only cycles, D-bol only cycles, D-bol primo. Again, some of that is just anecdote based on like very, very small sample size and individuals who might have just been genetic anomalies at the end of the day. But what I've seen seemingly is, in general, like at the end of the day, you should be assessing your response to singular compounds one at a time, regardless if you're doing, a test only cycle to start with, whatever it is. Like you're not going to be layering, hopefully, a bunch of random shit on top, not doing D-bol kickstarts with your test and layering extra androgenic and estrogenic activity on top, leading to very difficult to manage, estrogenic burden side effects and other issues from an androgenicity standpoint. Keeping in mind too, when you start to get your SHBG into like single digit crash territory, you're freeing up a ton, like any DHT that would have otherwise had a very high affinity to binding proteins to be bound up and regulated accordingly is freely circulating to wreak havoc in terms of androgenic activity. So not only are, additional anabolics or high dose, even high dose test on its own is going to crush your SHBG too, but any compound stacked on top is not just the inherent activity of that compound, it's also the potentiation of the testosterone effects and whatever dose you're using of that's occurring, because there is competing for androgen receptors occurring between these compounds. There is crushing of binding proteins, which has the highest affinity to bind up and regulate androgenicity from your DHT floating around. In addition, you have competition for aromatase, overlapping estrogenic activity of the multiple compounds, progestogenic activity potentially on top from the tren or the nandrolone, whatever it is. At the end of the day, again, this goes back to lowest effective dose, titrating up accordingly based on needs, and lowest effective dose is like for side effect mitigation. If you were on, started at 600 test off the bat of test E, and you exploded in acne, would you not have been better off with, a 250 to 300 entry point and maybe have used a propionate instead of an enanthate? Obviously a tall task to ask for certain individuals to be, committing themselves to like very short esters off the bat, which has like, understanding of pharmacokinetics is even more important. You can't have a lower, margin of error and whatnot. But, hopefully if you're pinning your fucking ass, like you should understand this stuff thoroughly enough to even realize like why that may be a more viable alternative than a long ester that you're pinning, twice a week or something at a dosage that you potentially are going to need like a 5-AR inhibitor and or an aromatase inhibitor off the bat just to manage the estrogenic and androgenic side effects of it, etc. And as well, frequency of administration brings it back, the actual frequency of hormone spikes, fluctuations in them, not just from your test, but from the downstream metabolites like your estrogen, your DHT, if you're administering nandrolone or tren or primabol and whatever it is, they all have downstream metabolites too. And the fluctuation, if you're pinning like once or twice a week or whatever, you're getting massive spikes and then dips and then massive spikes rather than steady little stable, levels that are more representative of endogenous function. That is where you are going to have the least likelihood for breakouts, is stable blood serum concentration as much as you can. I almost didn't even finish the words. Concentrations. Fucking blurring my words together. In addition, avoiding toxic carrier oils. This is something I really didn't want to forget to mention this time because I have in the past, but toxic solvents, carrier oils, shitty UGLs. Like if you get dirty ass gear, even if it's like, the active ingredient is present that you were trying to buy, if you are getting like really poorly made, shitty stuff from a preparation aspect, a sterility aspect, so many different things that go into the quality of the end product, you can fully expect, increased oxidative stress, and downstream of that, like oxidative stress seems to be one of the main mediators of acne development, and is where managing it becomes crucial. So again, this is also just like the quality of the product, not even your own genetic response to the drug itself, but also what else are you injecting into your body that could be potentially toxic. Again, above and beyond, going back to the oxidative stress too, managing that oxidative stress not only through what is going into your body, but also what is in your body from a fuel aspect. Do you have a high quality micronutrient dense diet and potentially supplementation on top of that? In addition, topical vitamins seem to move the needle in some capacity with certain minerals like niacinamide, vitamin that can be useful. Zinc topically seems to be useful as well. Circling back, high quality diet. I really want to re-emphasize the importance of that. Like it's not just about hitting your macros, but also your micros. High quality sleep, super crucial for all things restorative and health related, including skin quality. Basic skin hygiene and bacteria removal, actually like just basic taking care of your skin from a showering aspect, from a scrubbing aspect, whatever it is. UV exposure. Now this is a controversial one. I'm not necessarily, and again, none of these I'm like saying, because some of these are going to get more and more like hectic as we go down the list. This is like, increasing severity of like, treatment options now, because we're getting into like the natural stuff too for natural guys, not like the stuff about the pharmacokinetics, all enhanced, practices, etc. But like getting down to what moves the needle for not only enhanced guys, but natural guys too, in varying, in like descending order of like least severe to like most fucking hectic. We have UV exposure, and this isn't exactly in that order, but it's a rough ballpark. But UV exposure, obviously problematic from a photo-aging aspect. If you're getting excessive sun, get skin cancer, you burn yourself if you're not careful. And I know a lot of guys, including myself, I used to go tanning, not just because I wanted a tan, but also because like it seemed to dry out the acne, and also it makes the acne less noticeable when you have like nice tan skin. So the drying out effect was very, very helpful actually for getting rid of my acne. And the tan skin also makes it look cosmetically more pleasing, because if you have really pale skin, the red inflamed acne spots are even more noticeable on super white pale skin. So anyways, reasonable sun exposure is honestly just a healthy practice in general. I'm not saying every time you leave the house, slather yourself in a toxic sunscreen or something. Certainly what I'm not what I'm suggesting to do either. There is a happy medium where, and again, if you're going to go the sunscreen route for, photo aging purposes, like there are mineral based sunscreens. I had a post recently about sunscreen that seemed to get a lot of, certain people who are like super immediately like, it's going to fucking cause cancer. It's like, as far as I'm aware, there are mineral based ones that can be reasonable and not unhealthy. If you get a good company that is making a good mineral based one, it seems like there are ones that are fairly safe. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. But anyways, more so about the, tanning to get rid of acne. It works, but I mean, to what extent and to what damage of your skin to actually get that effect. Reasonable sun exposure overall, just in general, getting it out in the sun is a healthy practice, and I would highly recommend it. And some sun exposure, even though it's not going to move the needle maybe as much as like, tanning a shit ton, it's still going to help in some capacity, not only for synthesis of different steroid hormones in the body and whatnot, getting your vitamin D in, and other, like circadian processes and whatnot, like setting your circadian rhythm properly. Like these are all things that are very important to optimal health, which downstream will be conducive to skin health. But you get some of that, like beneficial UV exposure from a skin aspect too. This is a bit more anecdote than anything. So again, you know, do not take that with a grain of salt, of course, but I think reasonable sun exposure is like well accepted as like a healthy thing overall anyway. So yeah, azelaic acid and salicylic acid. This is one I am totally unfamiliar with, but seems to be a very, very common recommendation and potentially worthwhile for certain individuals, depending on, you know, acne type or whatever, but non-hormonal, you know, it's not something that's gonna like, it's not a topical anti-androgen that can bind to AR and cause like HPTA suppression or modulation of hormones. It's also not something that is going to permanently cause cell apoptosis of sebaceous glands, like a actual Accutane, which is super hectic, which we're going to get to shortly, but might be worthwhile to look at. Azelaic acid, salicylic acid, tretinoin. This is something that is seemingly good for anti-aging anyways, or other suitable retinoids, and on top of that has a good anti-acne effect. Some of my friends have oily skin and had some acne and are looking to optimize like anti-aging, you know, cosmetic, I don't know, like practices and whatnot. And it's like above and beyond like a basic moisturizer, a sunscreen if you know, depending on your interpretation of the literature, you know, a mineral one if you're going to use one and you're, you know, concerned about the chemical based ones and whatnot. Other than that, like one of the biggest needle movers seemingly in skin quality aspect is, you know, tretinoin or another suitable retinoid. That's worth looking at. Topical anti-androgen, recently Winlevi was approved. I mentioned earlier in the video, you know, the clascoterone CBO301 variant. The product name commercially, I couldn't arrive at the name. Brazula kept coming to mind. That is the topical anti-androgen still in the clinical development for androgenic alopecia, but that same active ingredient at a lower concentration is approved right now for actual acne. So that is something that might be worthwhile to look at too, and it seems to be pretty benign, at least from a like steroidal, you know, HPTA suppressive aspect. It does not seem to have like any negative feedback necessarily or go systemic to some significant degree. Topically, it seems to be well tolerated and may actually move the needle for some people, and it is, as far as I know, the first FDA approved topical anti-androgen. And don't use spironolactone, that shit's terrible. High dose vitamin B5, a very, very interesting one. If you look on YouTube, you'll see some drastic, insane before and afters, like Accutane level before and afters almost, using just straight up like over the counter vitamin B5. I believe that's pantothenic acid. And I don't know how safe that is, to be honest. Is that just, you know, you're going to urinate out the excess that you're not using? Is it going to be problematic? I imagine mega dosing any vitamin long term is not going to be the most ideal practice. But again, once you get rid of the acne, I think it's worth consulting your doctor on. Personally, if you have really bad acne, it seems to be a needle mover in a big way for certain people. That was worth mentioning in this video. And then getting to the next, the most extreme, nuclear Accutane, as mentioned in the video. And I should have mentioned, again, like anything, the minimum effective dose would be worthwhile even with Accutane if it's something you're going to explore. Now, obviously, a dermatologist are going to make your protocol, not me, so don't just fucking listen to me, obviously. But I mean, obviously, the typical recommendation, depending on who is prescribing, like may just be a full-blown cycle of it at a full dosage, even if you don't necessarily need that, just based on body weight and based on the fact that your acne hit their threshold severity level for actually prescribing it in the first place. Because again, it's not like all doctors have the same interpretation of like what makes sense from like a minimum effective dose standpoint. Like they'll give a fucking, I don't know, teenage girl like birth control, not often, but like, you know, actually pretty often I've seen people get prescribed birth control for controlling acne. Like it's fucked up. They're getting put on literally a combined oral contraceptive to control your acne, like without any education in the side effect profile. Pretty absurd. But anyways, Accutane, potentially, you know, a lower barrier to entry, like micro dose, may otherwise be, you know, good enough. You never know. Like the cycle I did was like a full-blown like half-year blast of like, I don't remember exactly what it was, but I think it was like 60 milligrams or something, or maybe even 80. And it definitely permanently got rid of my acne, but could I have gotten away with, you know, a lower dose? I don't know. I have no idea, to be honest. But I mean, like, I think it's certainly plausible that some people might have ended up using more drug than they needed or for longer than they needed, just based on like cookie cutter protocols. So, you know, it's worthwhile to actually explore the drug's side effect profile, risks, and weigh out the risk to reward for yourself and understand the dosage parameters if it's applicable for your body weight, your severity of acne, etc. And maybe consulting with your dermatologist on, you know, what your options are there. So anyways, that's the hit list. Hopefully that was helpful.